Hi there. Martel isn't here yet, so I'm going to give him a few minutes to show up, and then we'll get started. And if he doesn't show up, I will go ahead and get started without him. Today, we are finishing Wisdom Booklet 8. And had quite a few notes on this section that we quit on, and as you can see, my biggest note is this whole section sucks. It's it's a lot of Christian nationalism, which is not great, considering that this is for kids, and so I had a lot. I had a lot to say about it. And hey, Martel, glad you
Hey,
can join us. I've already started streaming. I was just kind of going over it a little bit.
sorry I'm late.
That's okay. Had a busy day, and I understand. But I was just kind of going over that we're doing Wisdom Booklet, the second part of Wisdom Booklet 8, and I had a lot to say about it because it's Christian nationalism, and
Oh boy, howdy is it?
yeah, and and it's Christian nationalism. It's uh, revisionist history, and I just had a lot to say about it because um,
I
this is
mean,
for
dude,
kids.
it's super topical, man.
Well,
Like,
and yeah, and that too. It's super
like,
topical.
like, 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 this is very much. I was like, is this where MAGA came from?
Um, I don't I don't think this is where MAGA came from.
I
Uh,
mean, this is definitely one of the eggs that I think it came from.
it
Like this,
it's certainly they share DNA. I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
I would say probably the American nationalism did not come from this. This came from the same place. Uh, but I mean,
yeah,
it
for sure.
could have been. It could have been that this is
I mean,
where they
I mean,
got it.
I wouldn't say this is the place, but I definitely feel like this is where that kind of thing started.
Could be. So one thing is, so the this whole section is adapted from an article on Imprimis, uh, which, do you know what Imprimis is?
No, I did look up another article, but I didn't see where it came from.
Okay, so Imprimis, let's see, Imprimis is that college, Hillsdale College. Are you familiar with them?
No.
Okay, they're a very right wing Christian nationalist college. Uh, they're almost more Christian nationalist than anything else. And Imprimis is a publication that they are. It's like a magazine. Like you can sign up for this. You can sign up and get Imprimis. You don't have to go there to get it. But I think they started in like the early 70s is when they started publishing Imprimis. And I remember when I used to listen to a lot of conservative talk radio, um, I'd hear uh, ads for signing up for Imprimis a lot. So that kind of tells you who their audience is. But
Right.
this whole section is adapted from an article from them, and it, it it's completely inappropriate for elementary students. It just is. There's no way you can get around that. But it it is what one of the things that the IBLP, even though they say, like in other places, I think they said that we shouldn't be political.
Right.
I think they said that in one of the books. But
Well, I mean, it's just like they say, don't be judgy,
right,
so you can be judgy
yeah.
as Christ intended.
What they mean by don't be political, I think, if I had to say, like, what they really meant by don't be political is don't be political as long as the politics are the right politics. You know?
Well, don't be political so long as, like, the politics are going ye old Christian way.
That's what I'm saying. As long as the politics are
Yeah.
going the right way, don't be political. But when they are going the wrong way, you got to jump in and start, doing whatever. Anyway, so with that said, I think I have a feeling that because there's just this article, which I had a lot to say about it, but I don't think I have enough to fill 2 hours. And then there's just, the next thing, which is the medical section. And I had a little bit to say about that, not much. So this might be a shorter show. It was just too long for...
Oh, I doubt it will be a shorter show.
It might, yeah, maybe not. But it might be a shorter show. It was just too long for one show. I mean, we were already at 8:30 last week. Anyway.
Right.
So let's go ahead and get into it.
Well, actually, if I may have a request.
Oh, yeah.
I have a tea that is heating up in the other room, and I'd like to go get that. Would you mind doing a recap, like scroll back through and like recap where we were at last week?
I suppose
because we started with Matthew 8 on page 1.
Yeah, I can go through the verse, because the verse for this one is Matthew 8.
All right.
Blessed,
I'll be right back.
All right. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And I was surprised that there's not much about like sexual purity in this. It's more about being well, they talk about being a pure society, and I don't know. I'm kind of drawing a blank here. Anyway, so but that was the verse for this book, and we talked about. One thing they talked about is I think, where is it? So they talk about not having a pluralistic society, and their math section was more about that than anything that was math related. They did get into a little bit of fractions, and yeah. You back yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Where are we at?
I was getting ready to get started. I couldn't really remember. I didn't plan on recapping, so I didn't look back.
Oh, okay. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I remember they talked about pluralistic societies, and I remember being surprised that they didn't talk about sexual purity at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And so we're picking up on what page?
Page 293. And if you watch the Discord, I've got it up for there so you can see it in the Discord.
Yeah, I've got my version up as well, because I've got some notes.
Oh yeah,
that I took after I sent you my copy.
Oh okay. Yeah. So
I'm trying to get better about it, man. It's just trying to start a new business as well as doing this. Like I feel like I'm pulled in several different directions.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, go ahead.
There was a couple things I wanted to touch on. If I can just quickly touch back up on some stuff from page 288.
288. Okay,
you don't mind?
Go. Yeah, that's fine. All right, what do we got?
So I went through this with more time than I was rushing last week.
Mm-hmm.
And in section 3,
Uh-huh.
Fire distinguishes true gold from fool's gold.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know why Bill Gothard is so intent on having everything be a metaphor for heat. But as someone who's an amateur blacksmith, as someone who is currently making their living doing metalwork, I need no fire to tell me the difference between pyrite and gold.
Okay.
This is just written for the sake of writing it. Fire is super not necessary to distinguish pyrite from gold. It's hard versus soft. It presents in raw form differently and has vastly different hard hardness. This section is written to make a spiritual point from nothing. There is no scripture about this. This is not an allegory to a real thing. This is just made up.
There's no scripture about fool's gold? I thought there was a scripture about fool's gold.
There's
Maybe.
there's not a scripture about needing fire to determine it.
Oh, okay.
Like he's saying that you will go through struggles and it will be like a fire and that will change you, and that is not in scripture and that's not in metallurgy. And I can go even further with the point of that here in section 5, when it's like the atoms in granulated sand are random arrangements so that they're not able to transmit life faithfully, which faithfully is a weird word when you're talking about refracted light.
Mm-hmm.
And then further on, after the glass is formed, it is reheated in an annealing process, which removes points and stress, or in a tempering process, which produces hardness and strength.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a very clever way to lie,
Okay.
which, because it's got just enough truth that if you don't know what they're talking about, you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense, because annealing and tempering are how you cool things that you've heated. It's not part of the heating process. To anneal something is to allow it to cool extremely slowly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I will have, like, if I'm forging something, I will either let it air cool, or at times I'll have I have a chest that is of high grade materials that dissipate heat very slowly. They're very insulated, but they're very high temperature stuff. So it's basically like if you picture a box full of uh, like that pink wall insulation that's in
Mm-hmm.
most exterior walls, but it's of a thing that is safe up to 2,000 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I will, to anneal something, I will put my extremely red hot piece of thing inside that chest, and it will cool out over the course of a few days. And a tempering process is where you see where they take your sword out and they stick it into some oil or some if it's Conan, they stick it into snow, which is stupid. But it it cools it rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But my
they do
point
talk
is,
about that.
right, but see, that's my thing. After the glass is formed, it is reheated in an annealing process, which removes stress points, or in a tempering process, which produces additional hardness and strength. And those are not heating processes, those are cooling processes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth going back and pointing out, because if you were doing, like, if analogy truly was the best way to teach, as he stated earlier, then the analogy for how you cool, whether it's annealing or tempering, would be much better related to a healing process and a therapy process or something that happens after your trial. But Bill Gothard doesn't want to talk about healing or solving things. He wants people to be ready to go through some hard, heavy shit. And so he only wants to focus on the fire, even though he's breaking his own analogy as he does it. And I
Hmm.
thought that was worth pointing out.
Yeah. And that's so like that's one of the problems with this. Like they do put a lot in these books, and it's hard to fact check the whole book, you know?
Right. Right.
And
This just happened to be something that, like, I was literally working on tempering while doing some aluminum casting.
Right. But kind of what I'm saying is, so like I can read this and I'm like, okay, yeah, I kind of know, I know, that sounds right to me,
Right.
be, because I know a little bit, but not enough to recognize this. There's probably a whole bunch of stuff in in the last 7 books that has
Mm-hmm.
been just like that, where we
Mm-hmm.
both read it, but we don't have like the the knowledge base to know the details that are wrong,
Yeah.
and they're just getting it wrong.
Yeah. And it continues further in section 5, where it talks about tempered glass being 4 times stronger than regular glass in that top paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so first off, tempered glass is 4 times is not the right number,
Okay.
but also it further breaks the analogy because tempered glass uh, is not just the cooling process. To be tempered glass, you have additives into it that increase its strength, that make it an alloy,
Mm-hmm.
which uh, he talks about further when he talks about a little bit about uh, alloys of things being stronger, but he doesn't want to go into that because that would defeat his analogy on pluralism. Because pure gold, having been just gone through a fire, is actually not good. You have to put alloys into it to make it useful for the things that we use gold for, like whether it be jewelry making or whether it be uh, very good wire for the conducting of high grade electronics, like what's in the satellites. It is not like this entire section about purifying and purity, and that's how you get to be the thing that we want to be, is both biblically unsound and scientifically not a good analogy. This is just manipulative, and I was blown away by that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. He's lying because it doesn't fit the analogy he's wanting, and so he's teaching falseness in service of the analogy of the so quote unquote greater truth that he's trying to teach.
Right. Which, as I understand it, is the true sin of blasphemy. It is saying this thing that this thing that I do is uh that I'm telling you to do is God telling you to do it. And so
Yeah.
when he talks, so he goes through and he's like, Project One, I want you to go through and think about all these fiery trials you came through, and how the fiery trials produce transparency, and then, as a family activity, have each member go through and share a fiery trial, which is have each family member, starting, which is going to start with the dad, recontextualize a trauma you have in terms of our cultist brainwashing system.
Mm-hmm.
For something that is not in the Bible and is not scientifically unsound, it is simply trauma bonding.
Yeah.
Okay, so I felt like that was worth dropping back for.
No, it was. You're yeah, absolutely. It just it needs it puts a spotlight on the idea that even the stuff that sounds right, like we can't just accept it from these guys. They've got an agenda, and they're
Mm-hmm.
willing to just make up whatever it is that they want, whatever fits their agenda.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which is just, man, man, it's crazy.
All right. So back to page 293.
All right.
We're starting the law resource, and this is again going back to the outlined goals of this curriculum, this is supposed to give you a pre legal education level of education. And so
Right.
that's what we're working for here. All right, looks like you've got quite a number of highlights before my first one.
Like you're like, we're not gonna have enough time to get this, and I'm like, well, I didn't get all the way through, and I was going nuts. All right, so 400 years ago, let's start with Mr. Gothard's interpretation of American colonization. 400 years ago, courageous Christian families fled their mother country and settled in the wilderness of North America. They left behind friends and possessions in hopes that the New World would provide freedom to worship God and teach their children the principles of His Word, which is just an incredible statement.
Yeah.
So like, fled. They fled. What did they flee from? Because they fled from a very Christian nation that had Christianity as a like as a state religion.
Mm-hmm.
So why did they flee? Because they were religious fanatics, man.
Yeah.
Like the there is there is work to be done, and has been done, to talk about whether the Puritan and Pilgrim work ethic are still having toxic effect today.
Right.
Like those weren't necessarily good people, and the idea that they fled persecution and stuff is just one the idea that they were just good people who just wanted to do their thing and got sent and came over just so they wouldn't be hassled. They were causing political and social upheaval in England. Like they were radicals.
Yeah.
And then calling America a wilderness is
Yeah. That
so
didn't.
offensive.
Yeah, it is.
Like there was existing societies here.
Mm-hmm.
It just, they didn't have the form, function, and flavor or religion of Europe. And so their wilderness?
Yeah.
How how toxic is that? Like
Yeah.
this was an invasion.
It was. You know, it reminds. So, uh, I just do you watch? Do you know? Have you ever heard of history buffs?
I love history buffs.
Did you watch the video he put out yesterday or this week about Shogun?
No, but I typically binge everything they've got once they get it fully done into a series. I think those should be used in school.
History buffs? Maybe we're talking about
Yeah.
a different group. The one I'm talking about is the one where he reviews like historical movie and kind of
Oh, yes, history buffs should be taught in school. Um, the ones I was thinking of was extra history.
Okay. Yeah, so he just redid Shogun. You are you familiar with Shogun, the show that was I think it was on Hulu recently in the last year or so.
Recently, no.
Okay. It's based on some book from the 70s, some historical fiction book. But one thing he pointed out was that like in the it's set in like this time period. It's during the age of sail, And I guess Portugal and Spain made a deal, or maybe it was Portugal and the Netherlands, I forget. Some two countries made a deal about what parts of the East Indies
Right.
each country owned. And like so this guy gets to Japan. He's not from the right country, and he's like, yeah, these countries from Europe, they've described, or they've decided which of them owns Japan. And like this ruler of Japan's like, they don't own us at all. You know? I
Right.
mean, it's like it's the arrogance of the colonizers.
Oh, I mean,
And
like
and this
you.
this these people are just perpetuating that arrogance.
Right. Like, you remember? You remember learning about Commodore Matthew Perry in school?
Mm, I don't remember learning about him in school. I remember watching a movie about him with John Wayne in it.
Oh, I didn't know there was a John Wayne movie about it. I'll
Pretty
bet it's
sure.
terrible. Um, because like I remember hearing about Commodore Matthew Perry in school, and it being like told as like some sort of heroic thing that he did to like reopen Japan for trade,
Yeah.
right? So what had happened was Japan had an encounter with the West and realized that it was toxic and dangerous to their moral fiber, and so closed off the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so nobody was going to be like only smugglers could trade with them. And so the U.S. sent a modern fleet and was like, "Hey, nice swords you got. We'll blow you up if you don't buy our stuff. Here, we'll make you a train. Now pay for it."
Yeah.
D- that's not the actions of a good people.
No.
It, but that's America.
I mean, that's our history, at least. In a lot of ways, it's the way we
I
still
mean,
are.
like that is very very much what we're still doing. We're sending our military over to places and be like, "Hey, buy our stuff now."
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we have history books that say we're still the good guys. Anyway, that was off topic. Um, but just a crazy way to start uh, these poor rebels, fanatics, uh, political activists essentially get kicked out of their out of England and come here so they can start their own stuff. All right, with you there. And then they call America a wilderness, which is terribly rude. And then we say that 200 years later, the descendants of those Christians met in Philadelphia to draft a document to give birth to a nation anchored to the rock of biblical truth and morality. You didn't have anything there?
Uh, I mean, there's there's things, a lot of things that like I hear all the time, um, and and so like I kind of like gloss over it. I hear the point that the U.S. laws are not based on the Bible, probably about 15 times a week. So like I was just like, oh yeah, I don't want to I don't want to keep reiterating the same point that everyone else reiterates all the time. I'd
Okay.
rather talk about things that like don't quite get the spotlight on them as much.
Okay. Well, I'm going to read this thing that I copied.
Sure.
How do they not know that only one of the 56 founding fathers was a member of the clergy? Will their faith be dashed if they discover that James Madison objected to chaplains opening the proceedings of Congress with prayer? Or do they believe that people will ignore the Bible if the Ten Commandments aren't posted in courtrooms, and nativity scenes must share space with the menorah. Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, and Monroe practiced a faith called deism. Deism is a philosophical belief in human reason as a reliable means of solving social and political problems. And deists believed, which is very popular at the time, deists believed in a supreme being who created the universe to operate solely by natural laws, like the Bible, and after creation is basically absent from the world.
Right.
The United States was not posted or created on Christian moral principles. The founding fathers chose not to do that. And the article that he posts by Dr. James Hitchcock, Dr. James Hitchcock he's only respected in Christian circles. He was a Catholic scholar. He is now a Lutheran scholar.
Mm-hmm.
Because even the Catholics were like, "Hey, buddy." So that bothers me. And then we talk about through much of its history, America has been assumed to be a religious nation, and indeed to be a Christian nation. At least that was invented at the time. Oh man, here's a good point. No, now we're to your point for your generations.
Okay. So I've got for generations, children across America have pledged allegiance. And I didn't highlight it, but they're trying to tie together the fact that children have pledged allegiance for generations, which I don't know that they've done that for generations. I can't remember when the Pledge of Allegiance was actually.
Oh, may I interject?
Sure.
Because my interjection will just go great. So,
well, let me
words,
sorry. Let me finish.
So the words "under God" were added to the Pledge of Allegiance on June 14th, 1954, when President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the legislation on Flag Day.
Yeah.
This was a regrettable aspect of the Cold War propaganda campaign against communism, which is dubious at best. The idea of generations of people having said "under God" and only recently falling out of favor is the opposite of truth. In fact, the IBLP was only founded in 1961, 6 years after "under God" was added in.
Yep. So I mean I was going to say pretty much the same thing. I did have a little bit extra. The original article that this was copied, they adapted this section from an article written in Imprimis and it was published in Imprimis in 1981. But this section specifically is not in the original article. This was added by the IBLP.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 1984-85. So 30 to 31 years. That's just not generations. They're mistaken. I think this is probably an honest mistake. Like I don't. Well, what I mean by honest mistake is I think they probably believe that the Pledge of Allegiance was instantiated, probably sometime in the early 1800s and it was in the same form as it is today. I bet you, I imagine they probably believed that. So I think it's an honest mistake, but it's just a lack of, it shows a lack of knowledge and a lack of due diligence on their part that they got it so wrong.
I don't see how that can be possible. If the IBLP was founded in 1961, I don't see how Mr. Gothard could not know about this big change happening 6 years earlier.
You're right. I mean, well, I don't think he wrote this, but he should have. Someone,
right? But
surely
but
someone
he taught this.
Yeah,
he taught the generations and of Americans doing this. He taught that we're getting away from our goodness because we're no longer being under God. Like that was a big thing. But IBLP was only founded 6 years after uh, that change was made.
Yeah.
So they knew.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And yeah.
And I don't see a another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
That this is either completely nefarious or so incompetent as to equal as bad an offense as being nefarious.
Right. And I mean, like, the whole thing, every bit of their curriculum has been incompetent. So and like utterly incompetent. There's no question about whether it's you can call it incompetent or not.
Right.
So yeah, I don't it does it, yeah, but you're right. It is really bad. Okay, so on the next comment, I had democratic pluralism is one of those major forces which has undermined our society because it promotes the destruction of all absolute moral values and beliefs in order to ensure the toleration of all religious and social viewpoints. So what I wrote is I don't have the ability to interrogate the author, so I can only assume what the author intended by absolute moral values. I can make some assumptions because the author was writing for the IBLP, and I would assume they mean something like the morals that are commanded by my strict fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible, although they wouldn't use those words. With that said, here are my comments. Christians, especially a certain type of Christian, likes to think their morals are absolute. Perhaps they are absolute, and we just have no way to determining this empirically. But it doesn't seem to me to be the case. However, pluralism is just that. You can't have pluralism if you only have one viewpoint. By definition, pluralism can't be about destroying other viewpoints. Pluralism is saying, hey, people who disagree with us exist. They should be allowed to have a voice for themselves. This does not seem like a bad thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Pluralism does, however, require one to recognize that one's beliefs are not universal and may prompt introspection. There is no requirement that you therefore abandon those beliefs. That can and does happen, but it isn't a requirement. If fundamentalist Christians find that pluralism is eroding their beliefs, it's probably because those beliefs are inherently fragile in the face of diverse viewpoints. This does not reflect favorably on the truth of those beliefs.
It does not.
It does mean that you must limit your actions to have a pluralistic society. You cannot silence opposing voices and also have a pluralistic society. Also, there's the paradox of intolerance. In order to have a tolerant society, there are some things that cannot be tolerated. So, and that's all I wrote. But, like, and
is this podcast going to be just full of woke stuff like that? Caring about people and logic?
I don't know. So, but yeah, and that part about the fundamentalists are so afraid of opposing viewpoints,
right?
Because when their worldview encounters anything else, it disappears, and that's a problem for them. But the problem is not a problem with the other viewpoints. It's a problem with their viewpoint being so wrong and bad, and but they can't see that. They think it's I don't know.
I mean,
deception.
That really should be a strong proof that your ideology is wrong. Is that when anybody travels outside to get new ideas, whether it be new ideas from school or new ideas about any other religion or new ideas about just no religion, as soon as anyone travels away from their fundamentalist upbringing, their fundamentalist church is like, they got ruined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As if only our ancestors who come from this one small town, we're the only ones who have the truth.
Yeah. All right. Next comment, and we both highlighted this one, but I'll go ahead and read mine since it's longer. In the 1950s, public opinion regarded religious beliefs and worship as beneficial to the moral fiber of the nation. My comment is, yeah, so this is an appeal to tradition, probably a tradition that was not, in fact, the case in reality. Also, if we were to look back at U.S. history and pick a time where the U.S. society was best, the 1950s is not the one I'd pick. Segregation is still around. Women are even further from being equal, and homosexuality was illegal. The list goes on.
Yeah. So my comment was, oh look, MAGA the egg. This idea should have been aborted back then. What else did we leave in the 50s? What else might have be different in the 50s time that had the effects of our nation being so great? Was it just the racism and bigotry, or maybe there was some like economic stuff going on at the time?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of economic factors that go into the 1950s that make them look really good economically, but like that's probably the one time in our history where the American dream, a family in a house of your own, was probably, at least and I don't know. I don't, because I'm not a history major or well versed in 1950s history, but it seems to me like that was the time where more people were getting the American dream than any other time in our history.
Well, yeah, of course. Like,
but
we had the GI Bill, which allowed for an entire generation to go to school and buy their first house.
Yeah.
This was before all that socialism stuff got started, where we took care of people who needed a leg up.
Yeah.
This was not socialism. This was a different thing, and that's why it worked.
Yeah, but
that's absolutely sarcasm, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
But it was only good for if you were white and Protestant. Like if you were not white and Protestant, the 1950s was not a great time for you.
Well, the early 1950s weren't bad. And then all the white people noticed that the black GIs also got some stuff, and then it became very bad. And then we had, the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Well, the Tulsa Race Massacre happened in the 20s.
Did it?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. My timeline was off. Okay, you're right. Yeah, America's always been shitty.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, moving on. All right, next highlight is on page 294. We've got to cite one particularly sensitive example. The nation was overwhelmingly family-oriented. Hence, there was general agreement about the undesirability of divorce, unmarried cohabitation, homosexuality, and other practices. I think I've said this before on here, but I think having a healthy divorce rate leads to healthier marriages overall. Because a marriage is not healthy because it has lasted a long time. It's healthy if the relationship is healthy. And when divorce is available as a release valve, the unhealthy marriages will end and the healthy ones will continue. So like
that's not the only way marriages end.
No, it's not. But what I'm saying is, if you make leaving a marriage an easy option, the healthy relationships will, for the most part, stay together because they're healthy, and the unhealthy ones will disappear until you'll be left with just healthy marriages, or more healthy marriages than not.
Right. I knew what you were saying. I was making a joke about how when we made divorce legal, there was a huge decrease in the number of shitty husbands who accidentally ate rat poison.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So
because that was a really popular thing for a while.
Yeah. And so see, I just talked about, then I talked in my comment about cohabitation before getting legally married isn't a bad thing. It allows you to kind of vet your potential spouse. And then I ended with there's nothing wrong with homosexuality.
Right. Like that's that. I had a similar comment. I don't know if you can see my comments in this section or not. But like, why are these bad? Why is divorce bad? In my opinion, divorce is basically always good
Yeah,
because like you don't come home to a happy, healthy relationship that's being successful and go, well, time to end this.
you exactly like
Like you end things that are bad and toxic and killing you.
yeah,
Unmarried cohabitation, I think unmarried cohabitation handled the right way would uh, make marriage more successful.
I
Um,
agree.
I mean, it might not be right now, but I don't think what we have right now is unmarried cohabitation because of romance. I think what we have right now, for the most part, is cohabitation because we can't afford anything.
Mm,
Um,
I mean, yeah. There's surely I'm sure that's part of it,
I mean,
but
like like
I don't think that
like
makes it unhealthy a cohabitation. I guess.
no, I don't think it makes it unhealthy, but a lot of people look at it like, oh, these people, they're living together and they're not staying together. Well, financial problems are also the number one cause of divorce.
Right.
And so when you have like when I've got three people living in a rent house of mine that I'm vastly undercharging for, and they regularly are like, all right, are we doing bills or are we eating this month?
Yeah, and I've said, I know I've said it at family meals, but you know, I don't think anyone should have to choose between paying for bills and paying for housing and paying for food. You should never. No one should ever have to make that choice.
I would even
Certainly
throw
not.
medical care into there.
I mean, that was another thing I say. Medical care, and you should be able to get all the education you want. Um, and
But go ahead. What you were saying?
uh, I lost my point.
Okay, so but this is such a crazy conservative like I can just picture the Uber '80s church Karen being like, they're into divorce and unmarried cohabitation and homosexual and other practices, like
Mm-hmm.
other practices. You're just gonna you know maybe they like yo-yoing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just the fear mongering.
Yeah.
Um, and then this is where I put my next note was during the past 25 years thing, and that was where I was like, in God We Trust was added in 1954. IBLP was founded in 1961. That's 6 freaking years.
Well, but this was written in the 80s.
I'm aware, but like, what generations? Like, what moral panic are they talking about?
I'm probably say this somewhere because somewhere in here again, or I don't know, probably get to it, but I'm going to go ahead and say it now. I probably what I'm saying is I probably have this as one of my notes. But ever since I was a kid, I've noticed that every generation looks at the next generation and just says, these kids these days, they have it so easy. They're doing everything wrong. They're not ready for the real world. And people who are
I mean,
you know,
Plato talked about that.
I didn't know he talked about that. I've
Yeah.
never
So 4th century BC Plato says, and this is translated into English, what is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders. They disobey their parents. They ignore the law. They riot in the streets, inflamed with wild notions. Their morals are decaying. What is to become of them?
yeah. So but my
So we've been saying this for at least 1,600 years.
Plato was like
No, 2,400. You're right.
yeah.
2,400.
So, but my point is, we're still around. No generation has failed yet. You know,
Right.
so the idea that I and what happens is the when you get older, it seems like when you're my age and your age, a lot of the people that get that old look at the kids that are the people that are just becoming adults and looking at them and saying, man, they don't know anything. But what they forget is you didn't know anything when you were that age either.
Right.
Like, and yet now you do. And they discount the maturation and the growth that they've gone through, and they don't remember how they were at the time. And then there's also the whole, it's not the way I did it. These
Right.
kids are doing it something differently. Like, there's the kids today in the last year have this thing called Skibbity Toilet. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. It's not something I'm interested in, but it's fine. It's not like it's going to ruin the moral fiber of the kids. It's just every generation has these idiosyncrasies about how they view the world.
Well, also, like, I remember being really proud of my Pog Slammer.
Right.
Like, kids are gonna get into weird stuff. It's fine.
Yeah. So this whole it's not the way it was when I was growing up. It's just has never rung true to me. And I've always like, even as a kid, I was like, you realize your parents said that, because adults would be saying that about the people that were like 10 years older than me, because they're the ones that were just becoming adults, and the older adults would be saying that about these people. I was like, you do realize that people said that about you when you were that age, and people said about those people when they were that age. Every generation says the same thing about the next generation. It's just, that's how it is. And it doesn't make sense to me to keep that cycle. Like, how can you not see that this is just the thing that happens to humans?
Yeah.
So, all right, you had.
I mean, so one thing that really made that stand out to me that I think is worth noting, because one of the things that kids these days do is wear ridiculous stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like they'll wear fashion that doesn't make sense or clash, and it clashes with that of the previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we
like
wore
Jinko
Jinko,
jeans.
like Jinko jeans. Kids wear skinny jeans. They're wearing spaghetti straps on their shoulders or whatever. But they're going back to like, how could they do that? How could they do that? How could they do that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I remember seeing, or the earliest I remember seeing of this, like, they're dressing as rebels, was in the 1920s, which would have been, the greatest generation that fought in World War II.
Right.
In college, it was a really popular thing for college dudes to wear long raccoon coats, regardless of the time of year.
Right.
And they would walk around with like this peppy step that was a little bit different and more energetic, kind of like what Groucho Marx used to have.
Yeah.
And it was like, in my mind, it was like, that is exactly like they're walking with a swagger like we did in high school, and they're wearing, pants and stuff that don't fit like we did in high school. Like, it's the same generational thing of like, I reject the things I don't like in my parents, and I establish my own identity as separate from them. But for some reason, for thousands of years, parents have been like, I don't like this, when it's the exact same thing that we did. Of course, I get to say this as an armchair parent. I just have nieces and nephews.
Right. Okay. Next, next. You have the next comment. It's as desirable.
Oh, yeah. Do. Wait, as desirable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Next.
Oh,
First.
yeah. Just like, yeah, modern society. So many Americans view the abolition of absolute values and moral restraints as desirable, which is a strange way of saying that, like, modern society rejects extremism.
Yeah.
Like, absolute values and moral restraints is extremism. Like, that's what the absolute values is. Like, when you say this is black and white, you are making an extremist statement.
Yep.
Uh, I don't. I don't see the negative here. Like,
I
unlike
mean,
back in the day when people had other religions, we used to just burn them.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you and I are like diametrically opposed to the viewpoint that this article is written from.
Right.
So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they make things saying things are bad, and I'm like, no, I think that's a good thing.
Well, sure. I'm just that. I don't know how you can say that is a good thing, though.
You know, I interact with Christians today who think absolute morals and values are not just desirable; they are the way reality is, and it's it's denying reality to say that these things are not absolute. So, and in a way, I kind of see like, okay, if reality is does have more absolute morals built into it, then we should recognize that because we should recognize what reality is. But I just don't see any evidence that there are absolute morals built into the fabric of reality. Um,
Sure doesn't
and
seem to be.
right, and so what you end up with is this group of people just saying, "Well, my morals are the ones that should be applied to everyone," and their morals kind of suck.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I've got the next comment. It says the fragmentation of values is viewed positively as simply bringing about greater variety and multiplicity in the world. And my comment is just reiterating, hey, if your values can't survive an encounter with different values, your values are not better. This is an absurd idea.
Right. Right. Oh, so this is where you don't have my notes anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Um. I'm just going to put this in the chat so that people can read.
You've
Wait,
got
no, that's not.
you've got a character limit in YouTube chat.
I know. I know. I know. I know.
Uh,
There's two sentences that I'm going to want to copy and put into chat when we get there that just demands by any particular group for or idea for favored treatment constitutes a violation of democratic courtesy.
yeah.
So that is an amazing phrase to say that we cannot have free speech.
Right. Like, yeah, because like I would imagine that if you talk to anybody who agreed with this, if you said, well, should we abolish free speech? They would disagree. They would say, no, we should keep free speech. But when it comes to their practice, they're going to say freedom of speech should be fine, or is fine, and we should have that. But
A violation of democratic courtesy? That's not even a real thing. Like, democratic courtesy is not a thing. Democracy should welcome all viewpoints. Democratic courtesy is two phrases plucked out of the ether and put together to build the idea that, well, in democracy there's this courtesy that you should be following, and anyone who doesn't is therefore wrong, which is introduced here to prop up the idea like that free speech is bad. And that's just incredible to me.
Okay, I didn't catch that you were. I mean, because I kind of agree with the statement. But so I thought that was something you had written yourself. You got that from
No.
the article. So, but I do agree with it. Like, we shouldn't favor any particular group or idea.
Right. But
And
you have to translate what favored treatment means.
right. And so when they write favored treatment, they don't mean the same thing that you and I mean when we say favored treatment.
Right. What they mean by favored treatment is, why is there a Pride Month but no Veterans Month? Is a very popular meme.
Mm-hmm.
We have relatives that have shared that meme, and every time I see it, I say, there are two Veterans Month. One is November, one is this month, and they are already on the schedule. It is for this reason. You are just sharing something to share hate.
Right.
Like, it is not favored treatment. It is the existence of, or public acknowledgement of, anything besides their worldview.
Right.
Is considered favored treatment. And that is not a violation of courtesy. It is not a violation of democracy. And it is not a violation of democratic courtesy. Because democratic courtesy should only be the ability to speak opposing views and understand them.
Yeah.
But some of these statements aren't just immoral, they're un-American.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I think I put the importance of the emphasis on I would put the emphasis on immoral, because I think more morality trumps being American.
Oh, no, I super agree. But at this point, like, what this is doing is this is the thinking person's version of MAGA. And it is also illogical. It is also wrong. And it is also, like, you cannot reach to these things and say, this is how we make America great again, because these things are not just wrong, they are un-American. So even if this was how to make America the way it was, this is wrong. This isn't how you do it.
Yeah. Okay. Next comment or highlight, unless you had one between that one and my next one.
My next one is on those who call pluralism.
Okay, so mine's right after that, or the last part of that paragraph.
Well, the second sentence is the other one.
Oh, okay.
I want to copy down into
Well,
chat.
it's already highlighted.
Right, right.
Um,
Well,
so
I want to put it in chat so that people can read. What it says.
okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and read it while you're doing
Yeah,
that.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So it says, in reality, unless a society maintains an authoritative value system, it finds itself powerless to maintain a truly tolerant environment. And like what they're describing here is the paradox of tolerance. Are you familiar with the paradox of tolerance?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very yes, but,
But
just that statement is so insane.
well, I mean, what they're saying is the only way to solve the paradox of tolerance is to have a top-down authoritative judgment on what's tolerable.
No, I don't think so. It says the only way to be tolerant is to have an authoritative value system that forces everyone to be tolerant in the same way.
I think we're kind of saying the same thing.
Right. I mean, we're both our brains are breaking in a different way over this statement. Like, an authoritative value system cannot be tolerant. That is, tolerant and authoritative are opposing ideals.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
I
and yeah, I mean, I think you can have. It depends on your authorities. You can have authorities that are tolerant by recognizing where that line really should be, and only allowing anything on the right side of that line. And that's authoritative. You if someone crosses the line, you say stop crossing that line, and it's authoritative. I think, and you do have to have that in some respect. You have to have somebody who says you can't cross that line. Now, it can be the authority can be the entire group. It doesn't have to be an individual, but there does have to be an intolerance of intolerance to have tolerance in all other aspects. And you can only have that you can only have intolerance of intolerance with authority. Like, you have to be able to say you can't say this here. And so you have to have that authority to be able to say that.
Right.
All right. Do you have any other highlights on this page?
Let's see. Where did I go? Yeah. Dr. Hitchcock observes that this necessary authoritative value system is attacked most often most obviously by the mass media, which, mass media shares like, fake news. He's prototype Trump.
Yeah, well, so he wrote this article was written right at the beginning of CNN. I forget when CNN first came on, but it was early 80s. This article was written in 1981. So, like, the idea of what we have now as mass media was just coming around. And I think the media, the 24-hour news companies like CNN and Fox News, and I don't even know
Mm-hmm.
who else, MSNBC, I don't whoever else there is right now. I think they have gotten more polarized now than they used to be. Um, so I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of trying to put this into context. What he was concerned about when he said mass media, he had no idea. Like, it's not what we're talking about, what we talk about today in mass media, because it was not.
I mean,
it wasn't
it is
anything like what he had.
no, but it was the birth of the 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, in the early days, CNN would do 24-hour news, but they wouldn't. So the problem with the 24-hour news cycle as it's evolved into it, as it stands today, is there's so many competitors, and you want to be the one that breaks the story.
Right. Right.
Well, you can't break the story and fact check it, because someone else is just going to skip the fact checking part and
Right.
just break the story.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware.
And so, but I don't think that was a problem in 1981, because there was only CNN as the 24-hour news company. So they could wait to break the story and do the fact checking if they needed to. You know?
I mean, I do not agree with you that that was a golden age of journalism when journalism wasn't yellow at all.
I'm not saying that it was golden age. I'm saying what he was looking at is what we're looking at today is on a completely different level than what he was looking at the time.
Fair enough.
Like if he were dropped, if Dr. Hitchcock from 1981 were dropped into today, he would say, I don't think he would say, oh yeah, this is just one more step. It's he wouldn't even recognize it, I don't think.
Probably. I can definitely agree with that.
Okay. Any other highlights on this page?
Yeah. I started doing some color coding with my stuff, but unfortunately it didn't get to you. Just of like, I don't really have any notes, but I just want to point out really toxic things.
Mm-hmm.
So here at the end of page 294, they're talking about the family and how their or institutions are habitually represented as dying, and dying because they are rigid, with their only hopes of survival being based on their ability to change, as if change is a bad thing. And then this line, thus, the family will survive, we are told, but only if we understand it as any group of people living in the same dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
As if the idea of family should not be able to fluctuate. That is not Christian. Like, my neighbor is everybody. My loved ones is everybody.
Right.
If I can't accept other people into my family, then those born to it. That is not the religion of Jesus of Nazareth.
Sure. And it's not just that. Like, the idea of disowning someone, or this person is no longer in your family, that's not a thing either.
No, not really. I'm
So,
just I don't know. I mean, I say this every week. I don't know how this stuff. I don't know how this stuff wasn't objected to in the moment. Like I feel like I can think about the good people that were in those rooms. How did none of them be like, oh no, this is super wrong?
right. I mean, I know I know people today who would read this and say, "Yeah, all of this is correct."
Well, I mean,
And people who aren't in the IBLP,
no,
but
I know that there are still people that believe these kind of things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in an entire room. How did nobody stand up and say that's not right? Because some of these ideas are just wrong.
um
Like not wow, this is some crazy Christian stuff, but like this is a bad idea from a bad moral standpoint, and it is also against scripture. How did nobody stand up and how did nobody how did
so
our parents
well, okay,
not
so
object to some of this?
I mean, I don't know. I can have my ideas about how why our parents didn't. There were people who objected to the IBLP from the beginning. You know, they said this is not true Christianity. This is not right. There were people that said that. We just didn't encounter them because we were shielded from them. You know? So and in when you're in the room with 10,000 other people who believe all this stuff, of course they already believe it. So they're not going to stand up and say it's wrong because they think it's right. And it's it's kind of like, you know, the example that's used a lot in Christian circles of boiling a frog, and you put them in room temperature water and you slowly heat it up. Um, it's the same concept with this cult. You know, there you got people who are already believing a lot of the stuff. You know, they especially I feel like this Christian nationalism, even if it wasn't called Christian nationalism, the idea the ideas about Christian nationalism, I think they were already in play when this stuff was coming about, when this was written. And there were people that believed it. I mean, what was it? The moral majority and the silent majority. That was that was in the that was in the late 70s when that was started, I believe. And so, like, the fact that that's a thing and was a thing at the time means that there were people that believed this. So they gravitated towards the people that were saying things that they agreed with. And that's the answer, in my opinion. That's the answer to your question about why did no one speak up saying, "Hey, this is wrong."
Hmm. I just it just blows my mind, man.
Sure.
Like there's been times in life when like Okay. So I was at this meeting for a group that I'm in about, and the meeting was not about uh, sexual harassment, but a person wanted to come in who had been a long-term member, like someone who had grown up in it, and wanted to read a statement about uh, some of the sexual um, harassment she had faced. Which, I mean, nothing like she'd been hugged without asking, and people tried to kiss her. Like it wasn't. Those are not okay, but it wasn't like the worst of the worst things that can happen. Although I know it's a complicated subject.
Mm-hmm.
So she came in and talked about stuff, and then we felt bad because like, oh man, because those blind spots, and like you never want anyone to feel unsafe.
Right.
Um, and so like there was good recognition and talk about, okay, this is something, like, see something, say something. And I remember walking out, and I talked to some, like, I stayed after to talk to some people about, hey, like, what should I look for, what things are actionable, what things are not, that kind of stuff. And then as I'm leaving, I'm walking down the hallway, and I hear these two guys who are also in the same meeting, and the one guy leans to the other and goes, you know the difference between sexual assault and flirting? And the guy goes, what? And he goes, success.
Hmm.
And I walked like 10 feet further before my brain caught up to like how messed up a statement that was.
Right.
But in those 10 steps, I had gone through a doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I turned around to be like, no, that's not okay. I got to say something. I go back in, and like, I don't know which guys it was. And so I couldn't do anything. And so I always look back on those moments when like I wasn't fast enough on the uptake. And so I let it seem as if I was tolerant of something that I'm not tolerant of.
Right.
That I did not confront the bad in the moment. And I think about that same kind of emotion when I look at this cult stuff, and like, man, how many decades did we not see the bad thing? How many decades did we not stand up and say, hey, families can be whatever they want? And it's good to have families that accept anybody.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, that was way off on one specific thing.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good to talk about, you know, it's good to stand up for things. But there's times when you don't, for whatever reason. And it's good to recognize those times and know, hey, I should have stood up for this and I didn't. And
Right.
and it makes you, when you recognize it, that makes you better the next time it happens. You know. But at least,
Yeah.
but you got to recognize it first, and so recognizing that you should have stood up when you didn't is still valuable. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So where are you at?
Unless
I keep getting my screen messed up.
I'm on page
So
294.
I don't see where you're.
I'm on page 294. I think we finished because your last comment was on the last sentence. So I'm going to move on to 295.
Yeah, 295. Okay.
Okay. I have a highlight, about half the page down. Do you have any before that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where, I mean, we already touched on it, but and in the first sentence, in those areas of the media which purport to be merely entertainment, The powerful weapon of ridicule is constantly directed at traditional values and those who espouse them. And that is where I brought up Plato.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and like, kids these days making fun of us old folks and our old ways,
Right.
as we've been doing for apparently 3,000 years.
Now, I'd say it's probably something we've done ever since speech.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there are so gentle listener and those my father, our mutual father, is one of the best moving artists I've ever known. Like, he is a very, very, very good mover. He taught me everything he knew. I am also a very good mover. However, I tape boxes better than he does because I built on what he did. And he looked at what I do and goes, nah, kid don't know nothing, and just does it the way that's always worked for him. But that is the truth of morality, of generational, like, we can only ever be as good as our generation. We can only ever be as good as our mind lets us be, as the things that are around us. There is always going to be further optimization. There is always going to be further things. Like, our founding fathers were great noblemen for their time period. Their time period also included slave owners.
Yeah. And
Like,
stealing from Indians and or Native Americans
yeah,
and all kinds of stuff. No, well,
like
like our founding fathers originally set it up, you could only vote if you were a landowner. Like so,
a male
class,
landowner.
yeah, classism, sexism, and all rolled into one. I mean, so yeah, they were by no means perfect, but they were
But
good for their time.
what right? But the idea that we're going to ridicule our kids is the other side of that coin, in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Where, if we're making fun of kids for thinking about stuff in a different way and possibly improving on the stuff that we did, we're saying that all the things were figured out in my day. I don't need to learn anything new. And that is terribly toxic.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. Next.
So that's what I got from ridicule. And my next one is the contempt for biblical morality in the first part of the our public schools really mean. I think, yeah, that's one before you. So apparently, the media does not hold a monopoly on prejudice against the values and beliefs of Christianity. Other powerful social ages, especially those controlled by the government, share a contempt for biblical morality. And I wanted, so you can devil's advocate. I know from our long history together that you can devil's advocate really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
What what biblical morality does the schools not show, or how do they show contempt for biblical morality?
Um. All right. So let's see. They allow homosexual kids to exist, and they don't teach the Bible.
Right,
Uh,
but that's not. But that's not. That's teaching the Bible. That's not biblical morality.
well, no, you so you can't have. Again, I'm playing devil's advocate. You can't have biblical morality in a vacuum. It has to be taught as coming from an omnipotent God. If it's not coming from an omnipotent God, it's not biblical morality.
So, is there a difference between biblical morality and morality?
I mean, for Christians, there's not.
So why
Well,
can't we just teach?
for fundamentalist Christians, there's not.
So why can't we just teach morality in schools, and then you tell them at home in church that that's where that God's where that comes from?
Because no, what you're missing is the only thing that is moral is following God, right? There's no like rules of what. There's not like a list of rules. It's following God, and so you can't be moral if you're not following God. And if you don't, if you teach morality without God, it's like it's teaching fairy tales as truth. I guess is maybe like no, I know. I mean yeah. But like if you don't say you have to do this because God says you have to do this, then you end up with a situation where someone says, well, why should I do this thing that I don't want to do? I think that's what the Christians are afraid of. I don't think that's what they're afraid of, but I mean, I think that's why, like, they think that's what's going to happen. Why there's no morality without God, and so if you teach morality in schools without God, you're just teaching arbitrary rules. Even if they're the same rules, they're still just arbitrary, and there's no reason that you should follow them. And humans, so you've got the verse where, all our good works are as filthy rags.
Yep.
So
one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. And, humans are only evil all the time. So, like, if you don't put some teeth on your morality, saying you've got to do this because an omnipotent God says you've got to do this, well, then people are not, they have no reason to do it, and they will actively not do it. Like, they'll actively not do it because that's what their nature is. So that's my steel man of your comment here.
Okay. I appreciate it. That was pretty good.
Okay. I have last phrase of the second paragraph of that section. Do you have any part before that?
Let's see. Where did you go? No, go ahead.
Okay. So I have which are actively opposed to religious values. Well, actually, I'm gonna read the whole paragraph, I guess, because it needs the content. So, consider, for example, the public schools officially neutral as to values. These schools increasingly are based on secular humanist assumptions, which are actively opposed to religious values. Humanist assumptions are not opposed to religious values either. They're neutral towards values. Humanist values, secular humanist morality is the most good for the most people. Now, if you disagree with this, you're either not a good human, or if you disagree with it, you're not a good human. If you disagree with this because of your values suck.
Well, I mean, but that's not following the spiritual understanding of the word humanism, as explained by Dr. Gothard.
Yeah. I don't remember what his version of humanism is humans are first.
And will become gods.
Right, okay. Yeah. I mean, that's not what humanism is, but
I'm well aware, but you can't straw man if you don't straw man.
Right. Okay.
I had one. So you talked about the church's uh, approach to religious values, and it goes on to say the courts and school bureaucracies are obsessively vigilant against the least sign of sectarian influence in schools, not so much as the whisper of prayer, reading from scripture, or reverential mention of God is permitted. Um, this was the heyday of Meet You at the Pole.
Mm, no.
Like,
See you at the pole. I think that was a '90s thing.
right, but like, religion was never out of school. It just wasn't led by the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. But so there's this saying. Uh, when you're in a position of privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Correct. Yeah, I've heard that, and I believe that to be true.
I agree, but that's what we're looking at. We're looking at people who had this privileged position, and now things are becoming more equal, and they're seeing this, and they're seeing that their privileged position, which to them that's normal, that's the way things are supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going away, and they're struggling with that.
Yeah.
Okay. I have the next highlight, I think. It says recent decisions have even forbidden students to use school property for private religious meetings.
Which
Go ahead.
that was never the case.
Right, I was going to say, like, maybe this is the case somewhere. I couldn't find any evidence of it. It's been 45 years since this was written, and I know that churches rent schools to hold services in. When I lived in Seattle. The church I didn't attend church for very much, but when I did attend church, their church, they didn't have their own building. They rented a school for
Mm-hmm.
their church service on Sundays.
That is one of the more moral ways to do a church service,
Yeah,
because you don't need to have this the expense and structure to be a church. Just be a church,
yeah, but
and you can spend your tithe and offerings on helping people and stuff.
yeah. So if in Seattle, which is fairly liberal, and it was in the most liberal part of Seattle too, like they had a statue of Lenin in this neighborhood. Um, if they in this part of the country can have a church service in a school, I can't imagine there's any place that they can't. You know,
Right.
it's fear mongering and a few possible cases, but it's not based on trends. And we
No.
see it. We see it today too. Like the Satanic Temple, they specifically set up these after school Satan clubs only in places where there's after school religious meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And but they so like the fact that there are after school Satan clubs shows that there are religious groups renting the school out
Mm-hmm.
at these times as well. So it's just fear
But
mongering.
that's not what's in the story, and I don't even think it's just fear mongering. Um, that is a problem of having a for profit news, because the fear mongering story has more hook and is more attention grabbing.
Mm-hmm.
So you rewrite your story to be something that's going to get the most clicks.
Well, yeah, Okay.
and religious or Satanists forming up objectionable school classes is going to get more clicks than uh, Satanist organization that is actually a protest thing uh, counters religious extremism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like both of those are reporting the same subject, but one is going to get 1,000,000 clicks and one is going to get 1,000.
Mm-hmm. But this guy, the guy who wrote this article, wasn't worried about the clicks. They did it to them. It's fear mongering.
Sure, sure.
So, my next highlight is in the last two paragraphs. Do you have anything before that of this page?
Just like I didn't get it. I didn't. This is about where I stopped being able to get my research done, and the schools. It says private institutions which are not required by law to exclude religion. Um, I just I don't want to get into it. Let's move on. Sorry, I was gonna go on to a thing about schools and charter schools, but I would go on to that for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, charter schools are the modern version of segregation in a lot of ways. Okay, not charter. Well, yes, charter schools, but also school vouchers. That's what that is. Yeah. All right. I've got second to last paragraph. I've got everything which is deemed worth learning, from patriotism to first aid, sooner or later finds its way into the school curriculum. When something is definitely excluded from the school, impressionable children and young people have difficulty not assuming that it is either false or unimportant. Excuse me. Sorry, I had to cough. Okay. So my thought on this is public schools don't focus on specialized knowledge. The purpose of a public school education, or primary education, I suppose, is to, one, expose the student to a wide variety of subjects, so they can see if any of them hold their interest that they would want to get more advanced knowledge in.
Yeah, and to understand people.
Yeah, but also it's to give them a basic, like, general level of education.
Mm-hmm.
Religion is a specialized knowledge that isn't applicable to everyone, because not everyone is in the same sect of the same religion. First aid can help everyone. There's not a person in the world that's alive that first aid will not help at some point. So teaching first aid is applicable to a broad people. Let's see.
I had a slightly different take on it.
Oh, okay. What was yours?
So it's not that schools don't teach religion. They don't teach preference. Just like schools don't teach preference for music or literature. Like, they might say this literature is badly written as compared to this one, but they won't tell you what literature should be your favorite.
Mm-hmm.
They won't tell you what music should be your favorite, and they won't tell you which religion should be your favorite, because schools are not supposed to teach preference.
Sure. Yeah. I agree with that. Okay. My last highlight on this page is covered up now because Adobe's being weird. Okay, there we go. Religion is defined as something one is free to practice strictly in private. And I don't know why they're saying this. Like, people practice religion in public. They don't practice religion in capital P public. like in the public sector, but they practice it in public. Like you see people in church, that's public.
Mm-hmm.
You see people, you know, doing street preaching, that's public. So like, I don't know why he's saying that it's defined as something one is free to practice in private.
Well, also, I don't think there's been a president in my lifetime that doesn't have a picture of them praying.
I wonder if Trump has that.
Oh, he definitely does. Like he just did a big photo op.
Okay, because I don't think.
Like,
I mean, I don't think he's Christian at all.
Oh, not a bit.
But he does. He wants to court the Christian caucus, so he has to pretend.
Yeah, man, that really bothered me. That the people believing his faith that doubted mine.
Right.
Like, this guy wants to talk about 2 Corinthians and not wanting to get into specifics of which testament he likes better.
He likes all of them. All the verses. They're all the best verses.
Right. Like, and so many people wanted to doubt me for having honest questions. Dude, that hurt. I cried.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, for sure.
Like,
yeah,
how can they believe him? Honestly,
you got me. I have no idea how someone can look at Trump and say this guy is being honest with me. He seems like a used car salesman.
He really does.
Like, but I don't want to talk about Trump. I mean, I don't mind talking about him. I just don't want to talk about him on this. That's not what this is about.
Yeah. Let's go. Where are we at?
All right. I think we're on page 296 now. I have one highlight towards the end of the second column, and you said you don't have any more highlights.
Yeah, I had. This is beyond where I had read to.
Okay, so this section is how are churches aiding the cause of pluralism, and says the so-called mainline churches, in fact, aid and abet the process of secularization rather than oppose it. And my comment is, all my life I've heard about what these secular churches do. I have never seen these secular churches or any. I've never seen a secular church doing this. I don't know where these secular churches are. I just hear about them all the time. And so like, it's just curious that this has happened. Hey, Deviant, she just showed up.
Hey, Deviant's the best.
Oh, hey, she says moving is a hassle. She's moving, and she should have called her dad.
Or me.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but like, are you going to go to Sweden?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
If you let me, I'll expense that whole trip.
All right, we've got page 297. We've got several comments here.
Right. Well, hang on. I want to bring up on 296 at the very top.
Okay.
Like, thus, as in the 1980 election, the cry continually raised that religion is meddling in politics. There have even been court cases supported by established organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, which invalidate any legislation shown to have been enacted under sectarian influence. And like, I did not know until much later in life just how much fundamentalist Christianity took over the Republican Party and American politics in like the late 70s, early 80s. Like,
Oh yeah.
I I was alive for part of that, but like it's interesting to see them like to see things like this in the text because like this was the propaganda that turned us into a fundamentalist nation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was born in 1980, so how much this actually had an effect, I can't say.
Well, I mean, right, but like this is propaganda from the time.
Yeah.
Like this may not have been the big one or the part, but like this was it.
Well, what I'm saying is I don't know that. What I'm saying is I don't know that this turned us into a fundamentalist nation or that we were always a fundamentalist nation. Is what I'm saying.
I don't. Well, I don't think we are a fundamentalist nation. I think.
Well, that's what I mean.
That,
Whatever you said, what it did do, I would say, is it did organize the fundamentalist caucus in a way
yes.
that they hadn't been organized before, and so if you look at like the way that what is it, prohibition happened, like
Mm-hmm.
it was the single issue voter that caused prohibition. These people that had there's this one thing that we have this big group of people across the whole country, and they only care about one thing, and they're going to vote only about that one thing. They don't care about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentalists, Christians, are the new version of that.
I think they are still that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what they are now. Like, I wasn't saying that the prohibitionists were fundamentalist Christians back then. Maybe they were. I don't know. I'm just saying it's the single issue voters, and that's what it was. Well, I mean, we don't need to get into that, but prohibition was not just about fundamentalist Christians. It was
no.
There was certainly that in there, but there was more to it.
But it was a political thing that got like there's a whole lot of people that got led by the nose over that single issue.
Yeah, and
just like there are a whole bunch of people being led by the nose now over our single issue and have been since ever, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Moving to the page 297. Got pluralism as a system in which diverse groups push their own interests strongly and persistently. And my just comment on this is, no wonder they don't like pluralism. They don't understand what it is. Because that's not, pluralism isn't where a group pushes their own interests strongly and persistently.
Man, I'm so glad we're doing this. Like, this is such a study in gaslighting.
Right?
Why do Christians misunderstand the motives of pluralism?
Because they've never been taught what it is. I mean, that's like...
No, but like that, like this paragraph is recontextualizing pluralism and why you thinking it's okay is the problem. Because if Christians were left alone without any manipulation, they'd be like, yeah, pluralism sounds cool. Of course we let people think their own things.
Some would, yeah. I think so. All right.
But we're just pluralism is bad, then sex is bad, and then oh my gosh. You don't have to protect truth this much.
Yep. Okay. The next comment, I thought I'd made a note about this, and this is it's marked a radical departure from the previous standards of behavior, and this is where I made that note about every generation since the beginning of time, as far as I can tell, has said the next generation doesn't know what they're doing and does. So we already made that point. We can move on, especially since we're running up on 2 hours now. And still not finished with this book. We may turn this into a 3-parter. Okay. Next comment is, for they realize if people of traditional values can be made to change their minds on this matter, they will prove easily malleable in other areas as well. So one is, I don't think the argumentum ad conspiracy is a strong argument. I do not accept that people are maliciously scheming to separate Christians from their values. At best, they are trying to limit Christians' harmful influence.
Right.
And also,
but that's not the purpose of that statement, though.
No, okay. Well, what do you think?
Okay, so read the statement again.
For they realize that if people of traditional values can be made to change their minds on this matter, they will prove easily malleable in other areas.
Right. So that language is not about the world, or that is about the Christian.
Yeah.
And it is written to emotionally control them.
Sure.
Like, made to feel, made to change their way. Well, you can't make me do anything I don't want to do. So I'm going to dig in my heels. And then it go. What was the second part? After made.
If they can be made to change their minds on this matter, they will prove easily malleable in other areas as well.
Oh yeah, and also easily malleable. No, like I am super firm in my things. You dirty people won't change my mind. Like this is trying to turn thinking people into a resistance group. These are the phrases you use when you want to get people to close ranks and not think about anything.
You're right. I mean, that's exactly what this is. It's wrong, but that's not the point. Is not whether it's right or wrong. The point is getting people to react, to manipulate them to react the way you want them to.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I missed that completely.
Yeah, and like I'm like that's again, I am not. More and more, I am not seeing this as like this was written by a guy who truly believed and just got it all wrong. Like, dude, some of this is written in such a way that like it's nefarious.
Yeah.
And they're like, circumstantial evidence can only be circumstantial. I get that, but like this is so well, and it's such a weird way. It's well written as a manipulative text, and also just like terribly written from a scholarship point of view. But it's so well written to the audience it was sent to.
Right. And so, and you've got to remember, this article was not written for this book. It was written for adults. And they've taken that and put this in this elementary school curriculum. That makes it like just that much more gross. These kids can't think critically yet. You know, they haven't developed that yet. And you're feeding them this.
You're programming your children.
Exactly.
To dig their feet in on the things you want them to dig their feet in, and reject even the notion of other ideas.
Mm-hmm. All right. Um,
Man, it's a miracle that we got out of this.
I want to make a note real quick. Go ahead and talk for a few minutes.
I mean, I got asked that uh, by a dear friend recently. Is talking about this podcast, and they were like, "So you were raised in this as if this stuff was true?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "How did you become someone who accepts other things?" And I was like, "Mostly it's my ADHD." So they were like, "So you got to be a good person." And then they had a whole bunch of bullshit they said after you got to be a good person. But I had ADHD, so I didn't really pay attention. And then later, when they were trying to catch me up on that stuff and I looked at it, I was like, well, that's not how you be a good person. So I just tried to do the first part.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So we've got the next one, and I want to move because I've still got like 3 pages of notes. I want to kind of pick up the pace because I'd like to get through this book today.
Do
Um,
you?
yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was gonna say we're at 2 hours and we're past my notes. Like I'm okay taking another stab at this and getting more notes myself.
Okay. Well, we are kind of at a stopping point, and it has been 2 hours, so we can do that too. Um, in that case, uh, I don't. I mean, we've only really covered one part of one thing so far. So what's the most toxic thing? It's the one thing, right?
No, no. I think the most toxic thing goes back to the fire thing I talked about earlier, back
Oh,
on
okay.
290,
Okay.
where there is in Christianity, there is this whole idea, like modern Christianity, there's this whole idea that you pass through the fire and it burns away your impurities. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not overly strong in scripture. In scripture, fire is usually a punishment. Like it's the hell, it's the bad. And it's used incorrectly because it's not in scripture. And if you wanted to use the analogy correctly, then it's not the fire that makes something good. Because if you just heat up metal all the way up and you get it completely pure, it's weak and it's brittle. You've got to put something in it to be an alloy, and you've got to take care of it as you temper it or as you anneal it to have it cool in just the right way to create the elastic and plastic properties that you want, depending on the what you're trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
And none of that has to do with just suffering. That has to do with training and healing, if you want to follow that analogy, and taking care of yourself and your health and your mindset. And that was completely absent from this lesson, and that was completely absent from all the Christianity. And it was always about go through the crucible, and like you got like someone has that terrible testimony where they did drugs and did all the terrible things, and they're so cool because then they turned it around. Like no, the fire, any there's so many different ways to heat something up to a point that you can do this kind of work to it. But it's the after bits. It's after the fire, how you what you put into it to make it stronger and how you cool it down and whatever. And that would have been so good.
Yeah.
But it's not just not in scripture. It's just fake. It's glorifying suffering as part of your belief.
I mean, Christianity kind of does that a lot, though. I mean,
Right. I mean that's my point. Like it's glorifying suffering as part of your belief. That's not good.
no.
That
Or
and so that is my most toxic thing.
okay. My most toxic thing is this article that we got halfway through, teaching that to first graders or second graders. I forget what grade I was in when I went through this, but still.
I was 3.
Right. I mean, well, you weren't 3 when you did this.
Yes, I was.
You
When we first tried to do it.
okay? I guess I don't remember that. And this has been like I've had a lot to say so far about this. You've had a lot to say about this, more than we have about any other specific thing, and it's because it's so uh it's so toxic to the culture, the society, and they're setting up their kids so that they can't even see. They don't even have a chance. That's what they're trying to do, and that's the biggest problem. Like the other stuff that they've done, it's not great either. But this is probably the most far-reaching thing that they've talked about up till now.
Wait.
As far as like what could potentially have the biggest effect on society, this is it.
Well, yeah, and the way they lie makes it so hard to change.
Yeah.
Because like they throw in bits of like, this historical name, but they change everything about it. Or they bring up this concept of like, here is how these poor people came to the wilderness and built this great society. Not religious fanatics were driven out of England and so invaded Native American lands.
Right.
Because when you recontextualize it that way, when other people try and bring up other thought, you're going to be like, yeah, I know all about that. I know all about that. I'll know all about that, until you realize they're trying to tell you something different than what you originally learned. And now you're back into they're trying to make me think something different.
Right. Yeah.
So you rejected it first because you know some of those names in your own stories, and then you reject it later because you've been told about the dangers of someone trying to mess you up,
Trying to change your mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like it is.
Go ahead.
It is just brainwashing.
It is.
Well,
it's indoctrination.
Indoctrination. Okay, and chat. What did you guys have your own most toxic thing from this week, or do you have any questions for us?
Yeah. While we wait on to see if anybody has any questions or any comments about the stuff we've talked about tonight, I was curious. So, like this stuff. How did it affect you when you growing up? Like, how did you? Because like in the past, in past books we've discovered that like you bought into a lot of this a lot more than I did, which I've been surprised every time because like I thought I was buying into it way more than you were.
Well, I mean, it's because it all happens inside you,
right? But so I'm just curious, like this specifically, this Christian nationalism stuff that we've been talking about tonight. How did that affect you?
I mean, it's my plan was to join. Like I was going to sign up for the military because that's what good people did if they didn't have anything else to do. that's the advice I gave to my to our little brother, that like if you don't have a career or a or like, you know, a relationship that looks like it might be a marriage or something by the time you're 23, just join up, because you know you'll be doing good and you won't waste your life.
Mm-hmm.
And like had I done that, I would be, you know, I would have done some things I'm really not proud of. Like the US got into some very immoral action in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And like it's weird to have been raised like, no, we're the good guys, we're always doing the good things, we're doing the good things, and we're the good guys, and all this like exceptionalism. And then like had this moment where I was like, you know, basically every president my entire life has had a news story that I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to, where one of our like Sam,
Yeah,
Samson, you there?
I took off the PDF because we're done with that.
Okay. Every president in my entire life has at some point just like lobbed 100 or so missiles at some poor country.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, you know, being like, oh, yep, that's why they're doing that. Good thing they're getting around to that. Because that's what they you know, they told me to think. But like, if every few years, probably more often than not, uh, our country's throwing 100 or so missiles into some poor country, we're not the good guys.
No.
And then like that made me start thinking about like, are we the good guys, or do have I been told we're the good guys? Because we know that history is written by the winner, and so I wanted to go through and like were our founding fathers these poet geniuses of their day, or did they write the history? Um, you know, and I so I saw I like it made me start looking at like it was probably the sixth or seventh time I relearned what world history was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what was really good for me was like looking up how they teach about wars that we've been involved in other countries. Like seeing how uh, Canada teaches the War of 1812, or how Mexico teaches, or Europe teaches the Mexican American War,
Right.
and we're we are not, America is not exceptional. I'm not even sure we're good.
Okay. Uh,
Like, but for that to be true, having been raised thinking that like we are the culmination of history, like we are God's plan.
yeah. Yeah. That's certainly a common thread in certain Christian groups. in the U.S. Missing Mod asks you why was it weird you didn't know any different?
Why was what weird?
You said it was something was weird towards the beginning. I don't remember what exactly it was. But if you don't remember, we can move on. She did have
Sorry.
another.
I do have memory problems, so if you want to re-ask the question, I'll try to remember this time.
Okay, we can circle back if she elaborates. But she does ask another question that I thought was interesting. She says, "I have a question. How old were you when you first learned about the end times in the Bible?" I'll go ahead and answer that one first, and then Martel can answer. So for me, it was I was in elementary school for sure, at least, or no older than that. And I believe we did a study of Revelation as a family. But also there was that movie, A Thief in the Night, that like if we were ever like if there was ever like an adult function when we were kids, and like the kids would there was like a children's, it wasn't like a regular Sunday school, but like if there was ever a time when like we were there on like a Tuesday night or whatever, not Sunday or Wednesday, and we would go, the children's workers would just put on A Thief in the Night every time. So like I watched that like so many times as a kid, and it terrified me. Have you seen did you ever see Thief in the Night, Martel?
If I did, I have no memory, which doesn't mean I didn't.
Sure. Okay, so it's this movie. It would have done well on Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's that kind of movie.
Okay.
It's a Christian movie from like the early 70s, and it shows the rapture and like the rise of the beast. It's a lot like Left Behind. But they use jump scares and horror tropes that were in that were around in the 70s. And so like the whole purpose of it is to scare you about the end times. And it did. It did scare me about the end times. I was very concerned that, maybe I wasn't a real Christian,
Was that the one where like people disappeared and their clothes came back? Or they people went to go, like a kid went outside and then came inside and his parents' clothes were like on the ground because they'd got taken, but he wasn't a Christian yet.
Yeah, I mean there's scenes like that. There was
I do remember something about that and being like very concerned that if I wasn't good enough, I'd come home and mom and dad and you would be gone.
Yeah. So there was, I think the scene you're talking about, I think there is no kid that's left behind. But there is a scene before the rapture where a kid comes home, doesn't see their parents right away and gets really scared. But it's before the rapture, so the parents are still there. And they come and comfort them and whatever. It really scared me. But I went back and watched them a couple years ago because there was a whole series of movies. That was actually a series of 4 movies. And I went back and watched that series a few years ago. And man, like what was really scary to me as a kid, I watch it today and it's like I don't know where it was filmed at. It was some urban town or urban city, but like not a super urban city. And like when she's running away, or when she's not running away, but before she gets, they identify her as someone who hasn't taken the mark of the beast. She's trying to go, buy food and stuff, and nobody will sell to her. And it looks like it's just kind of pathetic because she's like kind of just listlessly walking down streets looking for a place to buy food. And it's not like she's not a great actress, I think, because she's not giving any indication that she's scared or whatever. She looks bored more than anything else. And so, like, it's funny. It's funny how it changed, being when I was a kid and watching it as an adult. All right, let me scroll through and see if there's any other questions. Okay. I don't think Maud was asking us that question. I'm not sure who she was asking. Okay. Well, I think that's it. Do you have any last words, Martel? Oh,
No.
sorry. You didn't answer the question. When did you learn about the end times?
Oh.
Like how old were you when you first learned about the end times in the Bible?
I don't remember not knowing.
Sure. Okay.
Like,
I mean, so
I say I was 3 when we were doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 3 is what I call that's my before I went to kindergarten.
Right. Yeah, so
but like one of my earliest memories was that pro-life protest we went to at the Capitol.
Right. Okay. So I mean, I figured you probably learned about it at the same time I did when we did our study on Revelation as a family.
Right. Right. But I was 2.5 years younger.
Right. That's what I was going to say is, I was probably 6 or 7, because it was when we were in the gray house before we moved to the 2-story, and we moved there when I was 8. So, I mean, I was somewhere between the ages of 5 and 7. So that would put you, 3 to 6 or 3 to 5. So, yeah, I mean, it was young for sure. All right.
What a weird time.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions. So I guess that's it. We will call it a night. It's been 2.5 hours, and maybe we'll get through Booklet 8, next week.
How many books are there?
Like 50 something, 52, 54, something like that. So like,
okay.
So we're like almost 15% of the way through them at this point.
Almost done.
Yeah. I keep waiting. I keep waiting for it to get to something that I'm like, hey, that wasn't so bad.
No. Like, so far, this has made my friends the friends that have paid attention to this have been like, "How are you okay?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not. It's fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, any last words?
No.
Okay.
Catch you next week.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.